Hi, yogis. This week on the podcast, Adrienne and I interviewed friend, yogi, and councilwoman Sukh Kaur. Sukh and I have known each other for a couple years now, and she was recently elected to be San Antonio Councilwoman for District 1. We had a really fun and exciting conversation with her. It doesn't follow our typical flow of an interview, but we had so much fun. So we just decided to put this episode up just as it is. Hope you enjoy. Bye, yogis. Sweet. We are super excited to get into this interview. Today, we have with us friend, councilwoman, yoga teacher. Introduce yourself.
Hey, y'all, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So I am Sukh, and I am a newly elected councilwoman of District 1, but started teaching yoga about 15 years ago. And so I say, once a yoga teacher, always a yoga teacher, lifelong yogi, and happy to talk with you all today.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about yourself. When did you first find yoga in your life?
So I started yoga back in college. I'm played sports growing up. I was playing basketball, volleyball. Initially, they threw me into sports because I was a tall, lanky girl, and they said, "Oh, it'll help you get into college, so you should explore, extracurriculars." And my family, being an immigrant family, we didn't really understand what that meant for how the actual sports college game works because it's very intense. Like if you're not playing AAU and all those things, you don't really have a shot. But we just thought, okay, even if it got me active and engaged in a physical way, that it would be great. Also didn't realize that a problem a lot of tall females have is knee and ankle problems. And so playing sports throughout high school, I ran into a lot of that, and we didn't really know how to deal with it. And so it just led to injuries. And got to college. I didn't end up playing sports in college because I was grateful enough to get into Rife on academics, and just had a lot of knee problems right before coming into college. And so I had to take a physical education course. But given that I was an athlete, I was like, I'm not going to take intro to basketball for my physical education course. I was like, well, let me take yoga. I've heard that it's good for physical ailments. And so I started, it was one of the hardest things ever. I remember like my hip cramping so much in open half moon pose. Like I could not, no matter what I did, I could not get into open half moon because my hips would just cramp because I had never worked out my IT bands.
Mm.
So anyways, all of that to say, I started as a way to relieve some pain and stress around my knees and ankles, and found that as I continued on my journey, there was so much more to the experience than I had ever expected.
Where did you grow up?
I was born in India in the northern state of Punjab. So that also is always connected to my yogic journey because there's a lot of connection between our culture and yoga. But then my family immigrated to Maryland when I was young, and that's where I went to high school. And then I went to college at Rice, which is what brought me to Texas.
Nice.
Very cool. So, despite those hip cramps and, your IT kind of locking up on you, what brought you back?
Yeah, so I took that first class in college, and it was real basic, like these are the poses. It wasn't really an actual format of yoga. I would say maybe they tried to do a little bit of hatha, but I would say it was just more of an intro class. And so once I graduated, I became a teacher, and I actually just started. We got a free Teach for America gave us a free membership at the YMCA, and so I remember in my first year of teaching, just feeling like I needed to get to the gym. And after basketball, I would go take a yoga class. So we would play open gym, and then I just take a yoga class at the Y and really loved it. And then on happenstance, one day I was going to the dentist after my first year of teaching, and there was a yoga studio next door. And I'd never even thought about actually checking out a specific yoga studio. To that point, I'd only done yoga in gyms, like fitness gyms, large gyms. And so when I went into the yoga studio to just explore, one, I was kind of shocked at how expensive the classes were, which was
Right.
like, oh, okay. So, that was something that was that took me for a little bit of a surprise. But then I also just happened to see this yoga teacher training. And I'm always, as a teacher, you're always looking for a side hustle. And I thought, I feel like I could maybe do that, and let me just explore what that could be. And so I literally just signed up for this yoga teacher training on the whim of my the summer of my first year teaching. And that was it. And I've been hooked ever since. That was 15 years ago.
And were you able to accomplish the training just in the summertime, or did it bleed into the school year?
Yeah, so it was actually just during the summertime. It was a 10-day training, and then we had follow-up weekends after that, and then we had to do a practicum. But my mindset going into it was this could be a way for me to earn money on the sides, like on nights and weekends, and at the same time stay in shape. Because to this point, I had always picked up yoga for the physical aspects. Like it's going to be a great recovery. And then I took some of my first intense vinyasa classes there, and I was like, oh my God, it can also be a great active workout too, instead of just a recovery workout. So for me, it was like, I'm going to get to move for an hour and do the physical benefit of it. Not until did I actually go through the yoga training was I absolutely amazed at everything else that came with it. Like I had no idea it was going to help my mental health so much. And that was a big shocker and actually a really big blessing during that time in my life. I am a practicing Sikh American, and for me, religion was a big part of my upbringing. And there was a lot of values that, if you just look at the values of our religion, are very similar to the values that yoga teaches. But when there was all of the additional stuff that I'll say that came with my religion that wasn't resonating with me, that I didn't truly understand, yoga helped me fill a spiritual space that I was not getting with my religion. So it helped me. When I remember doing meditation, and even just the cut, I can't remember the specific name of it, but just like moving yoga, where you would just like close your eyes, experience music, and just move and be present. And that ability to find presence and stillness in the yoga room was a much more spiritual healing process for me than I had ever experienced in my religion. And so it happened to be just at the perfect time where I was really trying to understand what our purpose here is and how do we really connect with people and do something bigger than ourselves. And so the physical aspect brought me to it, but the spiritual healing and connection was what's kept me going.
Isn't it crazy though to think about it? Because I think about, like, I grew up in a Methodist Presbyterian church kind of thing, but my yoga practice has brought me closer spiritually to how I believe. Can you give me a little bit? I want to understand your religion a little bit more. So can you elaborate, especially for me or for our listeners that aren't really sure? Can you explain it to us?
And those overlapping values, especially.
Yeah, exactly.
So 100%. So Sikhism is a religion that was founded in India, and a lot of people think it was a sect of Hinduism or, like an offshoot per se, but it's actually its own unique religion. Our first prophet was born into the Hindu faith, but created Sikhism because he felt like neither Hinduism or Islam was truly the values that he was given and he believed that we should have. And so Sikhism is a monotheistic religion. So we only believe in one God, or in yoga, like we say, one energy, right? So there's one, and that's one of the overlaps that I found, is like there's an energy that connects all of us, whatever, regardless of what you call that energy or what I call that energy. It's the one thing that brings us all together, and that and not just us as humans, but the entire world, the entire universe together. And so we were founded on the beliefs of equality, equality for females, equality for religious beliefs. At that time,
That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like from the culture of what I don't know that much about other religions. I try to study as much as I can, but I don't get a lot of exposure to it. So I know that, like, specifically Indian culture is the woman is not an equal, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a lot of like cultural norms that came into play. And I will say, well, these were the values of our religion. Sometimes when it plays out, it doesn't always feel that way because of culture.
Gotcha.
But in the religion, if you look at what is written, is that males and females are equal, and you are able to do you're able to practice the same way. At some points there's some stories of like, oh, if you're on your period, you can't enter a religious temple. And it's always been for us where men and women can practice in the same way, can do the same things. And so equality has always been a big component, as well as social justice. Some of the two of the key pillars of the religion are selfless service and meditation. So we say Seva and Simran are two big pillars of the religion. And so those are some of the values that I would also, especially with the meditation perspective, right? And then, so the values in meditation is like, you think about how you find presence in a moment or stillness. And the thing that I really thought was very interesting for me is like, meditation is truly just being able to think or focus on one thing. And there's so many different forms of breath and concentration that yoga taught me that I wasn't just connecting with my religion, right? Because the words are different, the meaning is different, but like walking meditation. Mia's actually led me through one of these that has been amazing. And it's so powerful as how just like if you examine the way you're walking, how that can help you find presence in a moment. And so I think for me, it was like, this is the principle that I've always been taught. And it was given to me in a way that could connect with me and that I could understand and to identify more with. So those are some of the things that the Sikh faith really supports and believes in.
With that being said too, like, does the Sikh faith allow you to integrate yoga? Like, if they're open to it, right? Like, it's not seen as like a Catholicism. It's like, oh, it's the devil.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day.
We've had a lot of guests where like sometimes yoga and their religion feels like a conflict.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more connection because of the fact that it comes from, Southeast Asia, and there was a lot of people that practiced yoga. Like initially, yoga was created to help you sit still to be able to meditate, right? And so I think the connection there has always been great. My family, I think, was excited that I wanted to take it up, but I think also because that for them, like the traditional form of yoga is sitting and meditating versus like for us, we get so many different benefits out of, the vinyasa and the different forms that we experience. But I think when I initially said I was going to take it up, they were really excited. I think they were just like, yeah, this is going to help you be a better Sikh.
Nice.
So I don't think I got any pushback for this specifically from my family, except for maybe my, credit card purchases on all my yoga clothing.
Yeah, I feel you there. The pain of a yoga teacher's paycheck is real.
Hands down the hardest thing I've ever done. And I literally just fought in a boxing match last night. So still teaching is you have to come in every day on your A game and know exactly what content you want to deliver and what the best way to deliver it is to students. So that also, because you're doing such a big service, I felt like was also a very big strain for me because I wanted to be so great. I wanted to change lives. Who doesn't want to change lives, right? Like I wanted to come in every day and be the best I could be, but we're all humans. And so at times it felt like an insurmountable task. Like I wanted to have these great lesson plans, and how was I supposed to create that in 45 minutes a day? You really just can't, because you basically just need 45 minutes a day to breathe. And then I'd be like up all night creating lesson plans from scratch because the resources we were given wasn't sufficient. And so all of this to say, the pressures of being a first-year teacher was truly the most stressed I've ever been in my entire life. And so then coming into yoga, where it was like truly I could use a lot of those skills that I had gained from being an orator. There's so many different ways of teaching yoga, right? Through oration, through modeling. But at the end of the day, I think what keeps people bringing you back to class is your heart. And so the same heart that I was using to build relationships with my students, to show them that I cared about them and that I wanted them to succeed, was the same heart that I was using in my yoga classes. And so I think that was the biggest high for me, is that if you do anything, particularly when you're teaching or leading, with passion and allow people to see that rather than try to keep it closed off, and even being really upfront. Like when I remember there was the person who trained me was like, the hardest days are going to be where you just have no energy at all and you have to come into class and give for an hour. And you have to find your push from somewhere else. Like it's got to come from within. And then sometimes I would just be really honest about that. And I would do that with my students too. Like this, y'all, I'm giving you everything I have right now. Like it's coming from within, but I'm doing my very best. And people see that and appreciate it.
Such a
So
huge, honest, and vulnerable place to live from. And not everyone does it. Not everyone recognizes it. What grades do you teach?
my first year teaching, I was teaching 8th grade English as a second language. And so teaching what we now say emergent bilingual students, that was not language that we had back in the day. Wow, that just aged me. Can we nix that?
Sure, restart. Yeah.
So regardless, yeah. So I was teaching English as a second language my first year, and so a lot of my students either were I had mostly high and advanced high students that had been in the program for a while and just had not exited out yet because they hadn't received that mastery in one form or the other. And and those students, I would say, I was in Houston at the time, had faced a lot of them had faced trauma in their lives and were trying to figure out what their path was going to be. So I taught middle school when I was actually in the classroom teaching. And then when I was a school leader, I was grade 6 through 12 school leader. So I always had secondary kids. So they were older students, never did any kind of elementary work. I now go into school buildings. I'm like, I wonder how it would have been as an elementary school administrator or teacher. But I definitely liked secondary because it allowed for the ability to really have open, real conversations with kids, even if it was about them making fun of my outfit.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think about middle schoolers, like that was as a yoga teacher, I love teaching middle schoolers because they're so gawky and awkward. They're these weird little beings. Like one year they look like tiny little boys, and the next year they have got full beards. It's like deep voices. Everything's changing, and the impact that you can make in a positive way on a kid in middle school, I think is really like critical for their foundation.
100%. I absolutely agree.
So how did you transition? So you're not teaching anymore. Now you're doing political stuff. How did that transition transpire?
Yeah, so my story. So I actually, after I left the classroom, I went into full-time yoga teaching mode. I decided that I was going to try to be a full-time yoga teacher. And at one point, I was teaching 22 classes a week.
Oh, hell no. Hell no. Oh, no.
What I did was I calculated the amount of money that I would need to make to be able to like sustain as a yoga teacher. And I translated that backwards into hours. And I was like, okay, if I can pick up between 20 to 25 classes a week, I should be good to go. I'll be full time. And so that meant ideally I was teaching a couple of back to back every day, morning and evening, and then on the weekend. So I was basically working 7 days a week, just had a very different schedule. Like I would have long pauses during the middle of the day where I would be able to go and have coffee and things like that. So I didn't end up doing it for very long because it was so physically
fucking exhausting. I don't know how you would do that.
God.
Yeah.
100%. But I was in the best shape of my life.
I bet.
I like look back at the pictures from that time and I'm like, man, I look great. But
it wasn't sustainable.
It was, yeah. I was like, after a while, like there was parts where like some days I'd feel so mentally good and strong, but also when the thing that I've learned about yoga and I've tried to do a better job of doing is as much as you give, you have to spend time in there for yourself to receive. And that was the thing that I was not doing at all, because when you're spending your whole time there just to give, it's very hard to go back to the same space that you need to create that space for yourself. And so I did that. After I had left the classroom, I did that for about 4 months. And then I went back into education and got a full-time job again at a campus. And so transitioned back to being part-time. But through my education career, I served as a school leader, like I mentioned, and then wanted to figure out how we can create more innovative school models. And that's what actually brought me to San Antonio, which is where I was working for an organization, City Education Partners. And I got to start a couple of really cool programs that helped educators think about what would it look like if we were to truly change the way we do education. And I actually had a couple of people that wanted to bring yoga into the schools because so many people understand the benefit that it has for everyone, not just adults, but kids too, and how we can use restorative justice practices. Like I remember I was doing a after school detention once, and I was like, you know what? We're not going to write why you regret the actions that you took. We're just going to sit here and breathe. And we would do breathing exercises because truly like de-escalation strategies for kids should involve breathing and the practices that we know that are important from prana and your breath.
I love that
And
you
so,
said all that, because that to me, when you're talking about that, that's my language. Like, I want yoga to be a subject in schools, because kids need to be able to understand that movement is medicine, right? And that stillness and breath work is grounding, and that you can control your nervous system. Like, what if we knew that when we were kids? Like, I would have been so much happier. And I worked with Chicago schools, and specifically in like different school districts. And I would go in and I would teach during like their wellness hour, their recess hour, right? So 20-minute classes twice, back to back, get one group that comes in, but there was a in-school suspension group. And I was like looking at these kids, and this kid came in, his hoodie up, head down, eighth grader. And I looked at him and I could just tell. And I go, "What's up with you today?" He goes, "I got ice today." And I go, "What's ice?" He's like, "It's in-school suspension." I was like, "What are you going to do?" He's like, "Nothing." And I just thought, like, bring them in here. Like, I understand that, yes, they got in trouble. They got to, be pulled out or whatever. But why, like you said, why are we going to make them write out things when they should be learning how to regulate their nervous system in a better way so that shit doesn't happen again? Period.
And if we can do it when they're kids, imagine that practice could last their entire life, and maybe we would not see some of the things that we see from adults today. Right?
Exactly. Yes.
Regulating your emotions, acknowledging how you're feeling, acknowledging the control that you have over your mental state, over your surrounding, there's such important skills, especially given the amount of rise in anxiety that we have seen with kids these days. Like, because of social media, because of technology, there's just so many more emotions that kids and adults, quite frankly, experience. And we have not been given the tools to deal with them. And so even us as trained yogis still fall into it. So imagine if you've never been given any of these skills. And something really personal, and I'm sure she won't mind me sharing this, but my mom struggles with bipolar depression. And some of the skills that we are learning in yoga are the ones that we want folks that are dealing with mental health struggles to have and use, because they are so impactful in how you train your brain. And I remember when I was in my training, we also learned about the power that yoga and breath has on even things that we think are incurable, like cancer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, if we can truly have the power to change these the things that make us, and the diseases that we think are crushing, then I sometimes feel like if we all had these skills, our universe may be very different. And so I know, to finish your question, I always thought about this in politics, right? So I went through innovation and trying to help people create new school models, and then just still felt like the system was so rigged. And at one point in my life, I thought I was going to do human rights work, and I just couldn't, because of the amount of trauma that's associated. I feel like I'm a strengths finder person. One of my strengths is positivity. So I need to be in an area where I feel like I can have positive change. And it was something I was really worried about with politics when I decided to run, because I do thrive off of being in environments where we're working together and we're working for a common purpose, and the work is bigger than us. And so I wasn't sure how that would play out when it feels like our community is so divided.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of my motivators to running, and something that I felt like I could bring, right? Everybody is going to have their opinions, and I have to take stances and make tough decisions, and folks, yes, will be upset. But I believe that if we are able to use the practices of communication, of leading with your heart, of trying to understand before, we try to share what we're saying, all of those things that we learn in yoga, that maybe politics would become a place where we're all working towards the same goal, maybe from different angles. And so it was definitely one of the things that I thought about would be an asset on the dais.
Yeah. How did you decide to run then? What brought that about?
I was looking at a lot of the systemic inequities that existed in education. And this is something that there's a question that I've battled my whole life, which is, do you fight the broken system from the outside, or do you get in it and try to be a player and fight it from the inside? And I'd always kind of thought if I could just be on the ground in schools, that I would be a game changer. And then time and time again, you hit your head on a brick wall and you're thinking, we got to move this brick wall. And how do we move it? And then you're like, all right, I got to jump in. And so that's what motivated me to say, like, all right, I want to jump in the ring and I want to be a player. And I want to see how we can change policy in our city so that we're not making decisions just based on who voted for us, but making decisions based on what neighborhood needs more sidewalks because their schools have mostly walkers and their kids can't get there when it's flooded, or when it's winter and there's no lights and it feels so unsafe that, you know, you feel like there's more crime that's going to happen. And if you're hearing gunshots at night and are woken up by constant loud noises, how are you going to be able to focus and learn in school? So all of these things that the city plays a really big role in, and what is the thing that we're thinking about when we're making these decisions? And so constantly trying to bring an equity lens and a kids lens first is what got me interested in jumping in the ring, that I thought I could bring a different perspective. I can't even tell you the hundreds of people that told me I was running for the wrong thing. They're like, you should be running for school board. Like, you're running for the wrong position. Your background and expertise is not fit for city government. And I'm like, but that's exactly why I'm running. It's because my experience is different and hopefully will bring a different perspective and lens to the council.
Yeah, it's hard for me to talk politics and not have a negative taste in my mouth. You know, I just have no... I think it's interesting the way you said it, like helping from, you know, try to break in from the outside or be on the inside making the change. And I've never felt like when it comes to politics that I feel like it's authentic. Like I've never felt that authenticity with someone when it talks politics. And I know Mia was really interested in politics and lobbying when she went through college. I wasn't, because I just saw it as it's fake. It's not real. These people are just making money. Like I had such a negative bias against it because of all the negativity that you get from it, right? And I think it's so inspiring to see you with the idea, I want to be positive and I have to be positive and I'm going to make these changes to step out there.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to ask, I think thinking about that lens and already hearing that people told you this isn't the right spot, this isn't the right seat, have there been policy moments or votes or decisions where you might even think, you know, I wouldn't have thought about it this way, but with the lens of a student or kid or education, I'm making a completely different decision than my coworkers, right?
I don't know necessarily that I've had that experience particularly just yet, but I definitely do think that even when it comes to how we're training like for example, our workforce development program, right? There's a lot of areas where I think that my experience has helped me understand how we've got to where we got to today. When I was a school leader, I was 100% supportive of college for all. And it's because it's what I would argue the movement was, you know, again, I'm going to say back in my day, and that makes me so sad, but there was a big push for college for all, right? Because the problem that it was solving was only certain people were told they were able to go to college.
Or could afford it, right?
Right, exactly. Before that, like, oh, if you were on a certain path, or if you looked a certain way, or if you came from a certain background, then you were ready to go to college. So what's the flip? Everybody's going to go to college. But that's actually also not the right solution, right? Because now we're saying, regardless of the fact that you may not want to go sit in classes for 4 years to get an academic degree that you may never use, maybe you're better suited for a job that's going to get you paying significant amounts of money, right? Even more than teachers, like a lot more than teachers, but we won't get into that right. But you know, you could be making a significant amount of money with an associate's degree or with a degree that's in an area that you love and you care about and you have a passion for. And then that could pull your entire family out of poverty and change the trajectory of your life. But the challenge with that is, how do you make that equitable so that the person who's sitting in front of you doesn't get to judge based on the fact that maybe you failed AP Calc that you can't do X? right? It requires a lot of work and time and relationship building to be able to give that kind of advice. And our school systems aren't set up for that.
No.
And so all of that to say, I think one of the things that we can really focus on is how do we make sure we're doing enough to help kids find careers that are going to make their hearts happy and full and give them enough exposure. So there's a couple of really great internship programs that we have in the city that I'm trying to grow to make sure that students can access them. And there's a couple of things that I'm always focusing on, which is how do we make sure the right kids are getting into these programs? We have a lot of great things in our community that just don't reach the people that actually need them, because to reach those individuals requires more than a social marketing Facebook campaign. Because if you're not bought into what the city's offering, if you've been constantly forgotten about, why all of a sudden would you be like, yeah, I'm going to go have my kids sign up for this internship program. Oh, by the way, I have no way of getting them there, or have no way of giving them like bus fare or even figuring out how they're going to get lunch every day, you know?
Yeah.
So unless we remove all of the potential barriers for families that really need it and get to them where they are, all of the services that we have may not actually be accessible.
Yeah.
So those are some of the instances where I've truly felt like my experience working with families and students have helped me get a different perspective on how do we grow some of the things that we have and make them more accessible.
That's awesome. So from the perspective of yoga, right? Like, and when you go into politics, right? How are you talking about yoga when you're in your position, when you're in your meetings, your political meetings? Like, are you discussing it? Are you offering it up? Like, is our mayor practicing yoga? Is Ron on the mat? I've always asked that.
Ron.
I haven't asked him.
You need to ask him.
I know I should. I have started meetings in, just groups where we're breathing. And I do try, even when we're doing like invocations and things, to just constantly remind people to, like, even just as an example, by closing my eyes and breathing. I think that's a very small way that we can bring the basic practice of yoga is your breath, your prana. And so infiltrating that in conversations, I think, is really important. So that's one of the main ways that I have a fellow council member who's a Zumba instructor. So we have been trying to do a co-yoga Zumba class for our council colleagues, just so they can experience it. But I, more so than that, actually just offer it for any organization that wants it, right? So we have a lot of great nonprofits that offer yoga for free. And so if I'm ever doing a site visit, I'm like, I'm a yoga teacher. If you want me, book me. Like, it's one way that I can give back to my community. So we have an amazing park at Hemisphere, and I teach there every couple of months on Sunday mornings, just to teach yoga and give back in a way that I can. And so I have a platform now, and I want to be able to use it. And while I may not be able to specifically talk about it or teach it during the dais conversation, I can do it from other ways. So any nonprofit that sees me and is like, oh, we do yoga here, I'm like, sign me up. I'll teach a class for you for free. So that's my mojo, is to offer it to as many people as I can, so we can grow and spread the word.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. That makes me so happy. I want to know if Ron's practicing. I really do. I want to see him in class one time. I want to see him on his mat. I feel like there's so much benefit for specifically for someone in a position of power, like a mayor or like a city council person or like a governor. Like, you've got all eyes are on you. Right. And it's not just from like an outward standpoint, but then it's like you have to have enough within you to sustain that push and pull constantly, right? And like not be the person that's just talking to be heard, but actually having a message that's clear.
Yeah. And I'm often like, I don't necessarily just speak if I don't have something that I want to add to the conversation. And I'm always trying to listen. I think especially because I'm new, it's a very easy thing to say, like, I'm still learning and I want to listen. But that was also one of the things that I learned in a room, like when you're teaching a class and you just feel the energy of the room, to know whether you need to increase it a level or knock it down a level. It's generally really obvious, but there's like two ways you could teach a class. One, I have a script and I'm going to go through my entire script for my class. These are the poses that we're going to do, and this is how I'm going to teach them. And you can walk in and walk out. Or you can come in with an understanding of like, this is what I think we want to work towards. This is the pose that I think is going to be the peak of our class. And I'm going to adjust based on what I see people in class feeling. And I will ask them at the beginning saying, how are we feeling today? Where is our energy? And then I will observe and I will see how many people need a child's pose, how many people, when I cue it, get into it immediately, or how many are like, no, I've got energy and I want to expend, you know? And so if you just pause for a second and watch what people are doing and see how they're feeling and you adjust, it makes you a stronger leader, because then you're able to give them what they need if you watch and listen. And so I always try to go into any a situation with that, right? Seeing what people need, seeing how I can help, asking first, like, what is it that you need, before coming in with a set agenda and saying, this is what I'm going to do for you. Let's do this together. And I think it's a fine balance, because sometimes you do have to have some direction, but you also have to be open to seeing and being willing to pivot. Even if that means we're going to do back exercises for the last 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to spend on our back and class. And that's perfectly okay any day of any class or any meeting.
Yeah, exactly. No, I just feel like too, it's a really good point, especially from a yoga teacher's perspective. I'm a planner, right? I have to, for me to go and hold space for others, I need to put the preparation, the effort, the energy into kind of preparing myself, right? So I write out all my sequences, but I never follow the sequences to the T, because once I write it, that gives me the trust in myself. That's like, okay, you did the work, you have a plan. Now you can go in and not feel like you're lost or get distracted by what's happening in the room. You can hold that space with confidence to be able to move how they need you to move them.
100%.
Mm-hmm. That's very cool. What other questions do we have?
I was going to say, I know this hasn't been our traditional flow, but I'm very content with this conversation.
I know, me too. It's definitely not. But it's interesting because I feel like you're like groundbreaking in a way, because you are a yogi and you are in a position where you can have an impact on other people in a great way. And we need more of you. We need to just clone you.
No, I don't know about that. I think I have enough purple hair for the entire city of San Antonio. No, that's very kind. I really appreciate it. I think the most humbling thing is just being able to show, especially kids, right, that representation matters and leadership matters, and the way we carry ourselves, people will feed off of it. I feel like in today's world, given everything that we have, having the doubt and question of like, do I really belong here? And like sometimes I wake up being like, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing with my life? And I have those questions, and we all do, but then I always just think, right, if not me, then who? And maybe it's not me that creates groundbreaking change, but it's the little girl that I inspired that thought, you know what, I can be a Sikh South Asian American with purple hair and be a yoga teacher and also be a leader for our city and create change. So I just think about the inspiration that comes from the people that I would see when I was a kid, and how can I give that back? And that's kind of just what keeps me going. And like, can't echo enough how much yoga has helped me get to this place of stability. I think everybody thinks that no one is experiencing the same things they're experiencing. And when people sometimes hear my story and the different types of trauma that I've been through, you would see me speak in front of at a press conference or in front of a group of people and never expect the trauma, right? And you never know what someone's story is. And for me, yoga truly kept me going in my most painful situations in life, where I didn't know how I was going to make it out. I figured out a way to ground in my breath and move and cry it out on my mat, and it helped me become stronger. And so it has been, you know, the title of the podcast, What Yoga Means to You, and I yoga for me has been groundbreaking, has been the single thing that I can point to that probably has played the most influence in my life, from a connection standpoint, from an empathy perspective, from an evolution of personality. I was an angry child. I was upset with the world. I faced so much trauma. And yet, if you see me now, I probably hide it very well, but and not only because I've processed it and experienced what yoga can truly mean. And I think that's the perfect connection for me in yoga. And this is what like I can wrap up with is like the mind, body, soul connection. And I'm really good at isolating those things. And what yoga has done for me is figured out how to bring those together. I've always been able to work out my body and be physical, strengthen my mind, and then figure out a way to like cultivate my soul through religion. But in yoga, I get to do all three of those things together. And I think that's what has taught me how to be a whole person.
Yeah, I think it's the for me with my yoga practice and going through issues, traumas, whatever, it's like I've been able to recognize that everyone has a scary tiger, right? Everyone's seen a scary tiger in their life. I don't know what Mia's tiger looks like. I don't know what your tiger looks like, but I've witnessed a tiger. You have too. And just because our traumas are different, one may seem like a big one and one may seem like a little one, the non-judgment piece of it is really where I think that made the biggest change in the way that I carried myself, right? Especially from a yogic perspective, as I looked back and I go, I don't know what that person's going through. How can I judge them right now? Right? How can I be like that? I wouldn't want to be like that. I wouldn't want somebody to say that about me, So I always remind myself, everyone has a tiger and they're all really scary, but we all have tigers.
And non-judgment of yourself. For
Yes.
me, self-judgment has always been something that's been like the top of my list, and making sure that it's like, I feel like I'm always fighting against me, and learning to fully accept me and who I am for myself was huge too.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, being on the podcast.
Yes.
And I loved getting to hear about the work that you've been doing in office because, so we know each other through education, but I just want you to know I'm super excited by what you shared. You're like living the dream. I'm loving it.
I can't wait to see the impact.
Dream.
I know. I can't wait to see the next city council meeting where everyone's on a yoga mat.
Oh, challenge accepted. One day.
I love it.
All right, everybody.
I love it.
Your mat.
I'll donate. I'll donate mates. I'll give them mats. They show up. I just think it would be, I just don't think that people that, especially older people like us, like I'm in my late 40s, I'm 48 years old. So for me, if I hadn't have found yoga earlier in life, I don't know how I would take it now. So I think it's definitely something that you have the ability and we have the ability to help support you on that. We appreciate you.
Get on a mat today. Don't wait. You never know.
Exactly.
Get on the mat, because yoga changed my life, and I know it'll change yours too.
Thank
That's
you
my
so
public announcement message.
I love it. That's your PSA. I love it.